Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Now, Russia has declared a humanitarian pause in their onslaught on rebel-held parts of Aleppo, claiming fighters and civilians will be free to leave through safe corridors. Airstrikes by Russian and Syrian forces have been on hold since Tuesday, but rebels have rejected the truce and fierce clashes have continued in at least one area, both sides accusing each other of launching deliberate attacks. Our chief correspondent, Alex Thompson, has this.
This is what a safe evacuation route looked like in Aleppo today. The speaker blares from the armoured personnel carrier, talking peace and reconciliation. Gun and mortar fire, the reply. But Russia wants her story told. From 8 a.m. and the start of the truce, live webcams streaming the action from all 4 major checkpoints. Buses ready to take civilians and unarmed fighters away. Ambulances for the sick and wounded. And guess what? Nobody came across from the besieged east. Just a few hours into the truce, one of the Russian webcams shows people scattering for cover. A mortar, apparently fired by rebels in the east, lands at one supposedly safe checkpoint, confirmed by an ITN team who were there. And this, say the Russian and Syrian governments, is proof that rebels in the east are preventing civilians escaping because they need them as human shields. Across the lines in the east itself, the fighters there blame the government and Russians for opening fire, not their people.
And that's a shell now. Can you hear it? Now they're falling on the Castella Road. They're targeting the road. There are clashes in the area. No civilians can cross.
Leaflets, not bombs for once, dropped onto East Aleppo's 250,000 civilians, telling them to get out while they still can.
My feeling is that, from what I'm hearing, that the people do not want to leave their places. They do not want to become refugees. They want to stay in their place, but they do request stop the bombing, which needs to be, by the way, from both sides.
It's their feeling too. Anti-government chants on the streets of East Aleppo today, safe from bombing for a few hours, underlining the point that some at least simply will not leave. They've seen the government dropped leaflets promising green buses to safety, but in East Aleppo, the buses are a symbol of defeat.
As you see, we continue our resistance, and these green buses are a curse which will bite back at the regime.
However, given the enormous difficulties of cutting a deal, the UN at this stage is merely trying to agree some way of getting the sick and wounded out.
We believe we now have all of the green lights that we need, both from the Russians and the government and from the armed opposition groups inside, and we hope that the first medical evacuations can take place tomorrow.
Russia is talking about 4 days of 11-hour ceasefires, but says they will not be indefinite. And as you're watching this, out on the North Sea, a Russian naval battle group, including Moscow's only aircraft carrier, the Admiral Kuznetsov, is steaming south. Destination? The eastern Mediterranean, just off the Syrian coast.
And Iraqi and Kurdish forces have faced fierce resistance as they try to recapture villages around the last major stronghold of Islamic State in Iraq, the city of Mosul. The offensive, supported by coalition airstrikes, began on Monday. Today, Kurdish forces opened up a new front in villages northeast of Mosul, like the strategically important Bashika, where fighting continues, while Iraqi forces attacked Bartella, around 6 miles to the east, on the road between Mosul and Erbil, the Kurdish capital. They're also pushing north toward Hammam al-Halil. Our foreign affairs correspondent Jonathan Rugman is in Erbil in Iraq. Jonathan.
John, these are not official statistics. They don't come from PR people, but from within the last half hour, we are hearing from Kurdish Peshmerga on the front line that 45 of their men have been killed, 65 injured. We've also had a statement from the US military that one of their men, we presume a special forces operative, but we don't know, has been killed on this front as well by an improvised bomb. As for Iraq's elite, their so-called Golden Division, well, they're saying they have faced 14 exploding car bombs today. And from what we are seeing and hearing on this northern front, I think it is fair to say that this offensive is not going as well as hoped. This is what the Kurds wanted us to see. The village of Narawan falling within an hour early this morning, as 20,000 Kurdish fighters attacked on 3 fronts. ISIS sent up its own spotter drone, but it was shot down in a hail of gunfire, some of which seemed more for the cameras than for the enemy. Iraq's Prime Minister says his men have moved more quickly than he had planned or thought. Special Forces Humvees, backed by attack helicopters, advanced towards the Christian village of Bartella, vowing to capture it today. But the ambulances heading out and in told us a different story. Iraqi forces have not been able to enter Bartella because they've met stiff resistance from suicide bombers, and many of the buildings here have been booby-trapped. The Kurds too have struggled to make progress today because of suicide bomb attacks on their front line as well. So the battle for Mosul, Iraq's second city, has not really begun yet. There were so many ISIS suicide bombers heading towards the front line today that the Kurds couldn't stop them all. The Peshmerga were hoping to capture 29 villages, but faced with this, talk of victory seems woefully premature. And so a day which began with high hopes ended with at least 5 Peshmerga killed and many others injured. The sky above Bartella thick with mortars exploding mid-air, Iraqi forces encountering sniper fire, and the advance here temporarily stalled. Though gathering on the edge of this violence, a handful of Christians, desperate to return after living for more than 2 years as refugees. And you want to go home?
Of course. I hope that. I miss my village, Bartella. Yeah.
I can see it in your face.
Thank you, thank you.
You want to go back?
Yeah, of course.
Isn't it dangerous to go back?
Not dangerous, no. Bartella is important than my life.
Why is it so important?
Because I born in Bartella, I live in Bartella, and Daesh is not his city. It's our city, our country.
The Iraqis say they destroyed 11 suicide car bombs and killed 80 ISIS militants today. But day 4 of this offensive does not feel as successful as we have been led to believe. Jonathan Rugman, Channel 4 News, outside Bartella in northern Iraq.